Welcome back to my channel, and this is the third in a series of videos about intuition in the human design chart and also the significance of intuition in all of our lives more generally. And today we're going to talk about one of my very favorite subjects, the knowing circuit, which is the biggest subcircuit in the entire chart. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So as I said a second ago, the knowing circuit is the largest subcircuit in the human design chart. It's part of the individual circuitry. There are three main circuits. There's individual circuitry, tribal circuitry, and collective circuitry. And inside of individual circuitry is the knowing circuit, which is massive. It has 18 gates and 9 channels. It comes in through the head, comes down, splits in the ajna, goes on both sides of the body, comes all the way down to the root, and then back up through the central channel. So it's huge, okay? It's by far the biggest. So most likely you have something of the knowing circuit defined in your chart. Most people who I've done readings for, and I've done hundreds now, have some kind of definition in the knowing circuit in their charts. Which is pretty fascinating when you think about it, because it means that collectively we have more of the knowing circuit than we do of anything else. Right? And it is highly intuitive. The knowing circuit is not logical at all. It's not even right-brained. It's very, very unique to human design. There are two other main ways of knowing inside of the human design chart. One is logic, okay, which is that left brain energy. So it's logical, rational, or reasonable, and so on. And that left brain energy, comes right in through the channel here, crosses over, goes around the right side of the body, down and up through the central channel. Whereas the sensing circuit, which is in the right brain, comes in through the right, crosses over to the left side of the body, comes down and then back up through the central channel. So if you think about it, the knowing circuit is almost as big as those two circuits put together, right? It's really massive. And so we have three primary ways of knowing, two of which are intuitive. Now let's remember that the definition in the dictionary of intuition is any way of knowing that is not rational, reasonable, logical, and so on, right? Analytical. Okay. And so there's all kinds of different knowing that are not that, right? That is a very powerful and significant part of how we understand our world. And, Western science is based in it, and it's significant, right? And I'm not saying that we don't need it or it's not important. I'm just saying that it's good to put it in perspective so that we can help to break ourselves out of this kind of left brain dominance that we've all been acculturated into, right? Into really kind of seeing things through a logical, analytical type of lens. And this is what this series is all about, to help us understand that we actually have so many different kinds of intuition, and the knowing circuit contains a lot of it. Human design does have a unique way of talking about these left-brained and right-brained energies. Okay, they're not probably the way you would see a scientist talk about it, but they are related. But the knowing circuit, as far as I know, is pretty unique to human design. I mean, the whole circuitry is based in the Tree of Life in the Kabbalah. Which from the Judaic tradition. I am not an expert in the Tree of Life, okay? So I'm not going to be here to try and tell you how they relate to each other. Maybe some of you who are out there who are more experts in that can let me know, because I'd actually really like to know. But my guess is that it is the circuitry in the chart is related to the Tree of Life, and yet different. The same way that the chakra system is related to the 9 human design energy system centers, but it's different. The same way that the 64 gates is related to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, and yet they're different, right? So for all of the different, and also even the planets and how we work with astrology inside of human design is different than the way an astrologer works with an astrology chart. So just to let you know or remind you, if you already know this, those 4 ancient wisdom traditions, right? The I Ching, astrology, the chakra system, and the tree of life are all embedded inside of human design. And yet the way that they show up in human design is different than they are in the original wisdom traditions that they're a part of. Okay. I don't like to talk about it as an evolution. A lot of times people say that about human design. I think that kind of it maybe isn't in right relationship to those wisdom traditions, because I think they all still have their own integrity and their own value, and many people study them and love them. And so I think that's great. And human design has something really unique to bring, and I think the knowing circuit is part of it. So the knowing circuit is different than like the logic circuit and the sensing circuit, as there's an anatomical basis for that. You've probably heard me talk about Jill Bolte-Taylor's wonderful book, Whole Brain Living. If you haven't already checked it out, I highly encourage you to do that. She's a neuroanatomist, and so she talks about the anatomy of the brain and the qualities of the right brain and the left brain. It's fascinating. But with the knowing circuit, we don't have any anatomical connection with it, right? There's no anatomical basis for it. It's more like what we see in Chinese medicine with the meridians. The meridians are different energy highways, if you will, that run all through the human energy field, and they relate to the organs, for example, and they relate to the body, but they don't have a direct correlation. So like when they talk about your liver in Chinese medicine, they're kind of talking about the organ that we think of in Western medicine as the liver, but not exactly. And the liver meridian goes all over the place, including behind your eyes and down here through your neck, which is why we can get headaches, right, through that liver meridian. Okay, so it's more like that in the sense that it's a way that this field, this incredible energy field that we have, has been mapped with a different system, and it reveals many, many things to us, but it's not anatomically based. And when human design shows us through the knowing circuit, I think is just incredibly valuable. I mean, it's evolutionary. I would say revolutionary, but it's actually evolutionary. And the reason it is that it's in individual circuitry. So let's just review individual circuitry. So individual circuitry is here to be different. It's here to bring change. It doesn't fit in. And it's where the evolutionary impulse of humanity is in the chart, because it's the place where really new, out-of-the-box things come in, and especially through that knowing circuit. Through the knowing circuit, you can receive downloads. I know I have a lot of the knowing circuit defined in my chart, and I receive sometimes full ideas, completely full-blown. Other times I get bits and pieces of things that kind of add up over time. But then there's also this quality of just knowing things. Things that you don't know. You didn't learn it anywhere. You didn't read it in a book. Nobody told you about it. You never had a class in it. You never even heard anybody talking about it. It's just this deep inner quality of knowing, which is something we recognize as intuition, right? I mean, also the downloads as well, but this kind of deep sense. And it is one of those things that frankly makes a lot of people scared. Because when you know things about them, or you know things about something, and it feels uncannily accurate, and yet you have no basis for knowing it, then it can make people really uncomfortable. I know it made my parents really uncomfortable when I knew stuff about them, and I knew stuff about different things, and I kind of learned not to share it, and after a while I kind of shut it down because it did make people uncomfortable. It was like, how do you know that? And I didn't know how I knew it. I mean, especially as a kid. And I've done readings for lots of people and had clients who were like, oh yeah, I totally did that as a kid too, because this kind of sense of knowing was not something that was valued in the culture that I grew up in. Now, fortunately, I have talked to a few people who kind of grew up in a family of intuitives or clairvoyants or artists or, musicians or something, where that was really valued, actually. It was highly valued. So it's not that there isn't any place that it hasn't been valued, but it's definitely not very mainstream. And especially if somebody turns to you and says, hey, well, where'd you learn that? How can you prove it? What's that based on? It's like you have nothing to show. So it can make people, it can be scary, right? So if you've ever had that experience, I want you to know you're not alone. It's definitely, it happens for people. So it runs through the spleen over here on the right side of the body, okay? And the spleen is the center for instinct and intuition, and the immune system and right timing. And And as you may know, all of the gates in the spleen are known as fear gates because they're based in instinct, but their more empowered expression is intuitive. So let's look at the two. So the 57 has the fear of the future, and so the knowing circuit comes in from up above, through the 57, and then it comes out on the other side through the 28. And so the 57 is also known in traditional human design as intuition. Like, it's a highly intuitive gate. That's how I first learned it was the most intuitive gate in the chart. But it's also the fear of the future, which kind of makes sense, right? If you're highly intuitive and you see the future, there might be things that you get afraid of. But I think most of the time it's actually not about that. It's not prophetic in that sense. I mean, it could be, but very often it's just, we're just spinning out, a fear, right? And our intuition is giving some energy to that. So what we want to do is pull our energy out of the fear of the future, come fully into the present so that we can really tap into our intuition. Now, on the other side is the gate 28, which in traditional human design is known as the gate of struggle. But in quantum human design, it's been renamed challenge, and I like to call it opportunity or even adventure. Because it is in the knowing circuit, it is an individual circuitry, and it's on that leading edge of the development of consciousness. And so this is kind of the energy for where we go, where no one has ever gone before, right? It's that kind of energy. But it's the fear that life is meaningless. Like, when we're not connected to our intuitive knowing, when we are too in our logical minds, in our thinking minds, or in our programmed ways of protecting ourselves, where we kind of throw out new stuff, right? Because it's unfamiliar and we don't really know how to deal with that. And I call it the inner saboteur, right? So either of those can throw out these gems that are coming, through this knowing circuit. It's like, where did that come from? I don't have any basis in that, right? And if you do that habitually, and that becomes your basic way of living, then life can feel pretty meaningless, because actually all of this divine guidance that is coming to you on a regular basis is something that you keep throwing out. And then sort of ordinary reality, becomes, you lose the technicolor, right? You lose the full color spectrum, and you're kind of living in a very gray world, if you will, gray scale. Okay. So we want to be able to live in that full scale color reality, which is what the knowing circuit can bring us. And so if you have that 28, you want to be able to ask yourself, is life really meaningless? You want to talk to other people and say, is life meaningless to you? How do you find meaning in life? And then also invite yourself to be like, okay, if I am on this leading edge of consciousness, how am I experiencing that? How am I expressing it? How do I feel about it? How can I open myself up more to take advantage of this and feel like my life is full of adventure rather than feeling like it's full of struggle? On the other side of the body and the other side of the chart, the knowing circuit also runs through the emotional solar plexus. So it's also emotional. Okay. It has the 22, which is this energy about surrender. It's really about our ability to surrender to our higher guidance, our egoic projections, our egoic attachments, and all of that, right? Just to be able to surrender that whole piece and to live in a deeper state of grace, connected to the all that is continually bringing us our higher guidance. And the 55, which is on the other side of the emotional solar plexus, also in the knowing circuit, is about abundance. But it's not the abundance of accumulation. It's not the abundance of hoarding, the abundance of more and more and more. It's the abundance of knowing that you will have what you need when you need to have it. And that is, again, a state of grace that we can live in when we're deeply connected to this creative intelligence of the universe that's constantly giving us guidance through that knowing circuit. Now, one of the things I want to remind you before I go on here is that we all have all of the knowing circuit. You may just have certain pieces of it defined in your chart, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the video today about what you can do with that. But I want to remind you, you have all of it, and you have experienced all of it many, many different times in in your life. It's just that the parts that are white are going to be variable depending on your life experience, who you've been around, how you've responded to the people you've been around, how the people you've been around have been embodying and expressing their knowing circuit, and so on. So it's variable, right? Plus, it's not sustainable the way that it is for somebody who has it defined in their chart. So before you start going, oh, but I don't have any of that in my chart, you do have it in your chart, okay? And you can build your relationship with it even if it's not defined in your chart. I've totally done that with the sensing circuit. You may have heard me say that before, right? Only one gate in the whole circuit defined in my chart, and I have a very deep connection to that circuitry. There's also a lot of power in this circuit because it has all three of the four motors. The only center it doesn't have at all, which is one of the motors, is the will center. Every other center in the human design chart, it has the knowing circuit running through it. So it has the emotional solar plexus, it has the root center, and it has the sacral center. All are included in the knowing circuit. So it has a lot of power running through it. And so developing your relationship with it is really helpful for you to find new ways, creative ways, potentially for you to be empowering yourself. Now, let me just say for both the root center and for the emotional solar plexus, timing is really important. And that's true for those centers because emotions have an emotional wave, right? And so you need to take account of your wave, and timing is going to be different for that. Then with the root center, has an on-off pulse. Okay, so sometimes you're going to have more energy, sometimes you're going to have less, depending on how that pulse of that root is going. So both of those have to do with timing in terms of the motors and the power that they provide at different times. And the knowing circuit also needs time because let's think about this again. The stuff that's coming through there is not mainstream. It's not the kind of stuff you're going to see in the media. You probably won't even see it like in a movie unless it's something that's coming in a fantasy kind of movie of people who are intuitive or magical or something like that. It's not about actual people and how they live and what their intuitive abilities are on a day-to-day basis. Like we do not see that in a really honoring kind of way very often in our media, right? And so the stuff that comes in through that knowing circuit, it's different, right? It's designed to be different. It's leading edge. It's evolutionary. And so we really want to pick the right time, the right place, the right people to be sharing whatever it is that we want to share that's coming through our intuition. The gate that's always highlighted for this is the gate 43, which is called the Genius Freak Gate, right? Also known as the Gate of Insight, because it is an incredibly intuitive gate that's right at the beginning of the knowing circuit, right? And because the reason it's called the Genius Freak Gate is not because this stuff is necessarily freaky. It's more about the attitude of people responding to the insights that come through the 43. So this is a good way to think about the knowing circuit in general, is what's happening with that 43 is that how people respond to whatever those out of the box leading edge ideas are that are coming in through that knowing circuit is going to depend on when they're shared, with whom they're shared, the situation, and obviously how you share it too. So in order to be able to do that with the greatest effect, right, the best impact, you want to make sure that you're tuning into, is this the right situation? And not feel like, oh, wow, I just got this thing. I got to go tell everybody about it, which sometimes happen. I know I've done that in my life before, and I necessarily have very good responses coming into some of the things that I said. I also have an open throat, so I was probably blurting it out at times that may not have been appropriate. So there's that as well. But I'm just saying, you really want to tune into right timing, because you don't want to be putting out these gems and either nobody's hearing you, or they hear you and they're like, where did that come from? I don't know, where that came from. Or you want to be judged or rejected or demeaned or anything like that, right? You don't want to have that happen. You want to be able to be with other people who are going to be able to receive what it is that you're sharing. This is one of the reasons, so just side note here, that I am about to open my Becoming Sovereign virtual retreat center, which is where we're going to be workshopping and practicing human design together, along with other elements of feminine sovereignty, because we want to be able to come together with other people who totally get it, right? When we get these downloads, that we can share these with each other and we can workshop them, and we can talk about them, and you can see about how that's going to fit into your life and that kind of thing. So you want to be with people who can receive what it is that you're that you want to share, right? Okay, side note over. Fortunately, individual circuitry tends not to care so much about what other people think, but virtually everybody that I know has been conditioned to care about what other people think. I mean, fortunately, I'm at a point in my life, I don't know, it's partly my age, my life experience, but it's also my embrace of my individual circuitry that I don't care very much about what other people think. But when I was younger, I cared a lot about what other people think. And I think it's actually one of the biggest fears that many people have is, what will other people think about me, right? Or about this thing that I have. So if you have that, even if you have the knowing circuit defined or individual circuitry defined in your chart, I want you to know that you're not alone for sure, but it's not intrinsic to this energy, not at all. It's not intrinsic to the energy. So when you can strip away the deconditioning, then you'll be more able to not care so much and actually be open to be receiving what it is that's coming to you from superconsciousness. Now, for this last piece here, before we go into your action steps, is we say that this is individual circuitry, and it is in the sense that it is about oneself, right? It's not about the tribe so much, it's not about the collective, but it's also deeply and intrinsically connected to the flow of life or to this creative intelligence of the universe, because that's what's coming through this knowing circuit, right? It's very connected. So in this sense, you're not alone at all. Not at all. In fact, it's the interface with divine source energy. It's the pathway through which patterns of energy enter the human energy field through that gate 61, the gate of wonder, right? And then down and through the entire system. It runs through every center, right? Except for the will center. It influences our expression, our purpose, our contribution to the world, our abundance, our visionary leadership, our receptivity, so many things. It just influences many, many parts of our life. And it does it through our connection with that flow of life, through this creative intelligence of the universe. So when you really learn how to strip away the conditioning and to undo any self-judgment that you have about this, your own inner blocks, because I talk to a lot of people who are like, yeah, I know I'm intuitive, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't act on it. One time I acted on it and it turned out bad, so I've never trusted it again. And I'm kind of like, yeah, how many times have you done that with something that was logical, right? And you still do it logically, right? So anyway, we have a huge bias against intuition, right? Culturally, in places where Western civilization has really penetrated, which unfortunately is a lot of the world at this point. But there's so much available to us when we break out of that left brain dominance and we're able to really become receptive to what it is that is, wanting to come through that knowing circuit to us. Okay, so your action step here is to pull out your own human design chart and see what of the knowing circuit you have colored in, okay? This will be mutative energy that you have ongoing, ready, reliable access to and a consistent, even fixed way of experiencing it. That's what Deafin is, right? So you can learn all about these gates and their different expressions, and I would recommend that you get Karen Curry Parker's books. She has the red book, which is Understanding Human Design. She has the little book, which is about the gates in human design, which is a companion book to her cards. The Encyclopedia of Quantum Human Design will be out at the end of November, so get that for sure. And those are the different references that I would encourage you to get. But you can learn all about the gates, and when you do, you can see which of these are defined in your chart and what the different types of expressions are, so that you can go, oh, okay, yeah, I tend to express it this way. I could express it that way. So I want to give you some examples about that. Okay. So for example, I have the gate 39, which comes off the root center, and it's known as the gate of provocation. And it's a knowing energy. And, so this is one of those situations where you can just know something about a situation or just know something about a person. And if you're not tuned into right timing, as I was talking about earlier, it can just pop out of your mouth whenever that awareness drops in, right? And that definitely can poke people. Poke and provoke. And that can really turn them away. It can make them annoyed with you. It can turn away from you. But when you learn how to hold on to your awareness and see when is the right time to share it and with whom, it can be a super strong ally to you because it is knowing. Now, I use this today in my practice to help my clients break out of their assumptions that are holding them back or that are in their way. In particular, the ones that have to do with abundance and scarcity, because the mate of the 39 is the 55, which I talked about earlier, which is that abundance, right? And so that provocation of the 39 in many ways is really designed to provoke our assumptions about scarcity and break them apart so that we can step into a true state of abundance. That's kind of one of its highest expressions, right? But it can also be used for other situations in addition to scarcity and abundance, right? So I get insights through this, and I just need to really pay attention to when is the right time so that I can help someone have a breakthrough. Because if I share a piece of information and it's not at the right time, they're not in the right space, they're not ready for it, or I'm not in the right space to share it in a way that enables them to receive it, then it doesn't work, right? And we want our communications to connect us with each other and to be effective. So my suggestion is when you start getting these insights and downloads is to capture them, right? Capture your insights, write them down, right? Mull them over. Be open to what they might open up for you, okay? And see if, monkey mind, which I've talked about in the last couple of videos on intuition, starts rejecting what you're getting, right? And don't feed those dismissive thoughts. Stay open, ask generative questions, pay attention to what flows in next. Take action on what you receive. You can start with small things, that don't have a lot of risk to them, and then see how that feels. Check with your authority for support if you want and need it. But give yourself permission to believe in the gift of your inner guidance, and watch out for your well-meaning friends, but the ones who might not be, on the human design train and may not really be on track with intuition. Don't necessarily share with them. Share with people who are going to be open-minded. Okay. And the last piece here about your action steps, has to do with also looking at the openness in your chart. So I want to give you another example from my own life. So my dad has the channel 1-8 defined in his chart. It's going from the G center to the throat. Okay. So this is life purpose into your contribution in the world. And it's in a very prominent place in his chart because his unconscious earth is in the 8, and his unconscious moon is in the 1. So these are very powerful energies in his chart. So I don't have these defined in my chart at all, yet I feel a very strong affinity for the energy of these gates and the channel which connects that G center to the throat, so that the heart can express and activate, right, through the purpose and contribution in the world. I've been focused on this, kind of like most of my adult life, even though it's not colored in my chart. So this is something that I really received from him that also helped me to define my throat. Now, in addition to that, she also has the North Node in the 22, which I talked about a little bit earlier in the knowing circuit. And it creates an electromagnetic with my gate 12, right over here, which is bringing emotional power to my throat. So when two different hanging gates come together, he's got that 22, I've got the 12, then it also defines my throat and it enables me to express my emotional power that way too. And when we get together, that turns me into a manifesting generator because it brings this power to this throat, in the power of the emotional solar plexus to my throat. And that might explain some of why I've been able to use my throat well many different times in my life, as well as not so well at other times, even though it's not defined and it's definitely not motorized. So an action step for you, if you want to, is it's fun to look at the charts of people who you've spent a lot of time with in your life to see how you've influenced each other, whether that is, a family member, people you grew up around, if you have a partner, a spouse, children of your own, a roommate that you live around, just to see what the influences are. Because I think that that definition in my father's knowing circuit also really impacted me and influenced me. And I think it's something that I've carried with me, throughout my life. So that can be a really fun project for you. Okay, so that is my video on the knowing circuit in our series on intuition. And I want to encourage you to go and look at the description. It's not there as of right today when this is being released, but in just a few days, there'll be a link to join our Becoming Sovereign virtual retreat center, where we're going to be doing live events every month. You're going to get to workshop. You're going to get to connect with me, connect with other people. It's going to be very dynamic. This is not just another reservoir of data. It's not like that at all. That's why it's a retreat center, because it's where we come on retreat together to really be together, connect, workshop, play, work, and evolve together. So I hope that you will join us. Okay, many blessings, much love.